Hey guys, welcome to day 2 of your senior retreat. I am so excited to share a little bit about my own faith journey with you guys. If you don't know a lot about me, I came to New York from Indiana, so a little bit far off from what you guys are used to. It's very different. So I was, there's a lot of preparing I had to do before, going out there, moving halfway across the country. I had to kind of leave a lot of stuff here in order, pack up my most essential things, prepare for a year of ministry, working with teens and leading retreats and all of that. But one thing I didn't prepare for that I realized as soon as I got over there is I didn't prepare for the theater culture that is New York lifestyle, right? And I realized it very quickly because everyone from kids, teens, adults, grandparents, everyone kind of knows everything that has to be with theater. And I know nothing about it whatsoever. I've never been to a show, a musical, anything like that. And I was just kind of like always on the outside. Like I'd smile along, be like, yeah, sure. That's great. People catching shows here and there. People knowing, like having relatives who are in part of all of these different productions. Just all over the place. I was just like, all right, that's cool. I know nothing about this, but all right. Until finally here now, as I'm getting ready to close out the year, I finally realized I do know a little bit about theater, just a tiny little bit. And what I do know comes from the movie High School Musical. And before you start like rolling your eyes at me, like I know, bear with me. I think there's a good message in this movie. And so what the movie revolves around is Troy Bolton, right? He's a star basketball player who discovers all of a sudden that he has a passion for singing and performing and music and has a good voice. And so he tries out for the school play and gets in, he gets selected. But his friends, they're like freaking out, like, no, what are you doing? Like, we've got the state championship coming up. You can't be focusing on other things. Like, this is important. This is your whole life. We've been preparing for this. You got to focus. And then his parents are like, oh, college scouts are all around right now. You need to stop worrying about other stuff, worry about your future. Right now is not the time to discover new hobbies. And all of the little cliques in school, even the drama club is like, no, like, we don't accept you. Like, you're not part of our crew. And as a viewer, you're watching this movie and we just disregard all of these people. Or we're like, no, you're crazy. Troy needs to be on stage. This is what he is meant to be doing. Like, we can see it so clearly. And we're like cheering him on we get upset when he gets tore down by his friends. But then we're so happy for him, at the end of the movie when he's like, finally doing what he has been meant to do or has been wanting to do his whole life. And he just didn't know it. And that's kind of how Jesus comes into our lives, right? He's there all the time, that he's that love and that passion in our hearts that we have for different people and different things. But we don't always realize it's him. We don't always realize that he is the one that is calling us and always wanting to bring out the best in us and have us show who we really are and make us these wonderful beings that he created us for. And so in my life, I've had the glory of having like all these beautiful encounters with Christ at different points in my life. And I believe a lot of you have as well. You've been on all of these different retreats that CYFM offers. You've been on service trips. You're involved with your local parish's youth groups. And that is so great. That is so wonderful. Because that is how we discover a relationship with Christ, right? That is what we're called for. But now you're getting ready, to go into this next phase of your life, and it's very exciting, right? But it's also a little bit scary because you don't know what's in store for you. We have like all these plans, and we have this idea of how our life is going to look. But, maybe you also had a plan for high school, before you were going to high school. Maybe that didn't really go out. You still had some great moments, I'm sure, but maybe it didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to be. So now you're preparing for college, the workforce, whatever it may be that you are taking, that you're going to do in this next phase of your life, and you have this plan, and it's a little bit scary because you don't want to fail or you don't want to suffer. But I want to share with you guys this verse that's really kind of comforting for me as I carry on in my faith journey. It's in the first letter of Peter, and it says, "For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that be the will of God, than for doing evil. For Christ also suffered for sins once, the righteous for the sake of the unrighteous, that he might lead you to God. Put to death in the flesh, he was brought to life in the spirit." So I really struggled for a long time with that first part of that verse. For it is better to suffer for doing good. Because in my mind, I'm like, no, it is not okay to suffer. I don't want to have anything to do with this. Like, I met Jesus, things should be good all the time, right? But that's not the case, right? Because as we know the story of Christ, a lot of people all his disciples and the people he ministered throughout his life then had to see him be crucified. His mother, his poor mother, she's near and dear to my heart, stood by at the foot of the cross the entire time. And, it was painful for her to see the pain that he was going through. And so, but then, you're like, why did it have to be that way? Why did Christ have to suffer, and for that to be the will of God? Why do we have to suffer? But then comes that last part of that verse that I read to you guys, where it says he was brought to life in the spirit. Because after he died came the glorious resurrection. And that happens with each and every one of us. If you've been on a retreat, you've felt that, right? You feel that goodness in your heart. You feel Christ so present. And it makes you want to come back, or it makes you want to share it with your friends and your family. It makes you want to bring other friends so that they can also share in that life in the spirit, because that is what God does for us, right? He gives us this joy that nothing on earth can satisfy, no matter how much the world may tell us, like, this is what's good for you, or this is like, stick to the status quo, right? This is what you need to be doing to feel good about yourself. Christ is like, no, put all that stuff aside. I am the one that's going to make you, feel good. I am the one that is going to satisfy all those desires in your heart. And, the reason this verse is so important to me is because it took me a lot to realize this, because after, high school, I had this plan for my life that didn't go the way I expected. I got carried away in my freshman year of college by, hanging out with friends and going to parties and, sleeping in, not having to go to class so early. And, that kind of led to a very destructive, path for me, because after my freshman year, I didn't go back to school. I started, just working a part-time job. I was back to living with my parents, and just hanging out with friends, trying to, just enjoy like little moments in my life, but at the cost of a very, broken relationship with my parents, a very broken relationship with God. I would only go to church, on Sundays when I had to. I didn't want to face the reality of like my actions. I was just like, no, like, I'm young. I've got, a whole life to live. Like, stop bugging me right now. And sadly, this went on for a couple of years until finally, Jesus was like, enough is enough. Like, this has gone on too long. And, I was fed up with the life I was living as well. And so I allowed Christ to come back into my life. And he did so in such a wonderful way. It was so beautiful, the way God works, because, he came back into my life. And this time I let him. I was like, all right, go ahead, tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. Like, if you want me I want to share your message in whatever way you want me to do that. But, I was like, okay, like, things are good now, right? Like, I felt so forgiven by God, by my parents. We were working on our relationship, trying to make things better. I was opening up and sharing my experience with others, and it was good, and it was nice, and people were like helping me along the way. I was meeting all of these different people who had such a strong faith, who were inspiring me and kind of cheering me on, like, keep going, Alma, like, this is God, like, God is with you. And all that stuff is wonderful. It's what I needed at that time. But then there also came a time where I had to realize that I couldn't just shove like all the stuff I'd done. I couldn't just shove it to the back, I couldn't just like pretend like it didn't happen, because it did. It made me who I am today. Those experiences really made me realize how much I do need Christ in my life every single day, at every moment, not just every once in a while, or not just on Sundays. And so in going through this suffering, going through this hardship, it was only in doing that I was able to really appreciate Christ for who he is, for that life in the spirit that he has brought into me, into the people that I surround myself with. It's been wonderful, and it's been the greatest adventure that I could ever go on, has been that of following Christ, and I am so thankful for it. But that doesn't mean that, that I'm done. Like, okay, just because I, believe and follow Jesus doesn't mean that I'm ready, like I'm all set. Oh my gosh, no. So I continue, I have to every day, Christ pushes me and asks more and more of me, right? And it continues to hurt. There are days that are really hard. And then there are other days that are so, so good. And so what that brought me to, especially now in quarantine, all of us, right, had to readjust how we, live our life. And it had to get very uncomfortable for most of us. But Jesus, he works wonders in the uncomfortable. And something he did for me is he introduced me to this new form of prayer, which is, I'd heard about, but I'd never really done for myself. And it's called imaginative prayer. And so what it is like you kind of put yourself like in a scene with Jesus, or in a situation. And so what I did is I was, in prayer, and I was just, I was looking at the crucifix. And, a lot of times when I'm in prayer, I kind of like try and fix my gaze on him. And it kind of helps me, kind of like be looking at Jesus, so that I'm like, I feel like he's listening to me as I'm talking to him. And so I always just kind of like see like the crucifix as as a whole, right? Jesus is suffering and it's painful. But during this specific prayer, I fixed my eyes on his feet. For some reason, it was what I needed to look at the time. And I was just kind of gazing at his feet and like the wound right here, like this nail. I'd always kind of, like I said, I'd seen him as like a whole, right? All the wounds together. But at that specific time, I was just gazing at his feet over and over. And I was just thinking and thinking, and, kind of pouring out, my stress, my anxiety, to God, kind of telling him, how, what's the end of this? Like, what's going to happen? And I just kind of felt like he was telling me, and, I'll read it to you guys from here. It's, my little journal entry from that time. It says, I felt him saying, it's okay. You're here with me. I'll protect you. And that later, it continued. So that brought me to imagine myself kind of in a forest, and I'm like on this hike with Jesus. And as like we're walking, I'm like sweating and my feet hurt and I'm tired and I want some water. And, I'm just looking at the ground, like making sure I don't step on like any animals or like snakes, because all that stuff like, stresses me out. It's like I'm terrified of snakes. I'm trying not to like run into branches. And I'm so focused on like what I'm doing, like down here, like clearing my own path, that I don't realize until like I look up that, Jesus is like moving like enormous boulders out of the way for me. And he is shooing away the bugs, like, don't, leave her alone, like the snakes, all that stuff. He's like, get away from here. His feet are, in much worse shape than mine, because he's the one that's making the path soft for me. He's the one that's making it easy. And then that brought me to look at, my entire life, not just like that moment I was in, but it brought me to reflect on, where I've come, how far I've come, in this, wonderful life that Jesus has made for me. And there's those moments where, that suffering, or where I've been apart from Jesus, where I could just see myself so clearly, like trying to make my own path. and trying to move the branches on my own, and just and I'm just like, I'm struggling, and I can see Jesus like in the distance, kind of like smiling, but he's kind of like got this like worried expression, because he knows, like, if she just comes over here, this wouldn't be so hard. If she just lets me do that, if she just walks with me, it'll be better. And and then eventually, I'm back on the path with Jesus, but I can still see, the mountain ahead and everything that I've got coming up. And a lot of it is kind of unknown, and it's scary, and I don't know, how I'm gonna get through it unless I've got Jesus right there with me. I'm so thankful that he's come into my life. He's become, my friend, my savior, my Lord, all these different, titles that we have for him. But he is the one that is there. He is the one that is guiding me, and he will do the same thing for you guys as you continue on this journey, up this mountain to eventually heaven. Right? That is our hope, that we will come and meet him. And there's like this entire, if you allow him to clear this path for you and walk with you in your struggles, and let him tend to your wounds as you continue on. He will, he'll tell you some great jokes along the way. He will show you some beautiful scenery all around you. He will have you meet some wonderful people along the way. So look for those signs of Jesus working in your life. He does it in all these different ways. He presents to you these wonderful communities that help you grow as a person. And you also have to, it's okay when it's not okay too, because he's still there. He's still present, and he's still trying to make your life as wonderful as, as he desires it. But we've got to let him do it, right? We've got to let him come into our lives. So as you go into this next phase of your life, I invite you to really think about, are you going to let Jesus continue guiding you? Are you going to try and, carve your own path and kind of keep him off to the side a little bit? Are you going to let him show you all these beautiful things he has prepared? Or what's it going to be? Because, just because you're done with high school doesn't mean like, oh, things are good. I've already been on my encounter retreat. Like, I know Jesus. It's like, it's not just meeting him that one time. It's continuing to meet him every single day, right? It's continuing to walk with him at every single step of the way, at every point in the path. So just remember that he is with you, and you've got an entire team of people that are always praying for you. You've got your family, you've got your CYFM community, who, maybe you won't be able to see as frequently anymore, but they're still there. They're still praying for you. And you've got the entire communion of the saints and the angels who are cheering you on from heaven, and praying for your own sainthood. So just remember that. And as the wonderful, funny Troy Bolton would say, we're all in this together. We've got your back. See ya.